Hello, today is May 23rd, 2020. I'm Sonia He, and I'm here with Dr. Jeff Pan for an interview for the Houston Asian American Archive. So starting off, Dr. Pan, could you please tell us where and when you were born?
Yes, I was born in 1955 in Taipei, Taiwan, Republic of China.
Okay, and could you just kind of describe the household and community that you grew up in Taipei?
Yes, where I grew up, I would describe first as my household. It is a fairly typical kind of middle class family in the 1940s and 1950s. And basically, in terms of neighbors or neighborhood, most of the families are kind of in a similar situation. And people were really friendly, and kids of the same age kind of tend to hang around together, playing sports, playing games. So overall, it was kind of fairly homogenized neighborhood.
Okay, and you said that it was homogenized. So what did your parents do? And was it similar to what the other people in your community did?
Right. My father, unfortunately, he passed away at the end of 2018. My father was a civil engineer working for Taipei Municipal Engineering Bureau. And he basically designs and construct the roads and major roads and tunnels near Taipei. And actually, for several times when we went back to Taipei, I was telling my children about grandfather's work around Taipei.
Wow.
And, she was a teacher for junior high, but only for a fairly short term. She basically stopped working after I was born.
Okay. So what were some of the values you learned growing up?
Well, at a young age, I was realizing that the most important value is a family. It is important to kind of protect your family and keep your family inheritance growing. And I think by and large, each generation has a responsibility to kind of protect or improve the family status generation to generation. That's the first thing I learned. The second thing I learned largely is coming from my father. And he basically taught me is that work hard and never concede. And work hard and leave nothing on the table. And if you must fail, let your competitor beat you. Don't just in the tower yourself.
It's very important, yes. So what did you enjoy doing in your childhood? Like any favorite subjects or activities?
Yeah, overall, in the free time, of course, I enjoy hanging around with the boys in the neighborhood of the same age and playing sports and playing games. And as far as my favorite subjects, when I was little, most of the subjects tend to come to me fairly easy. And I particularly like arts and mathematics. And the arts that I like is like a painting or calligraphy. And I was also fairly athletic. And so by the time in my senior year of my elementary school, I was actually playing in 4 varsity teams.
Wow.
I was playing basketball, volleyball, football. In Asia, we call it football. In US,
soccer.
And then the dodgeball. So overall, the growing up experience was quite carefree, and I was enjoying a lot of love from my parents and my siblings.
Okay. How many siblings did you have, or do you have?
I have one elder sister and two younger brother.
Okay.
I'm basically the first son to my father, and
Mm-hmm.
is also the first son. So in the traditional Chinese family, it implies the special responsibility as a
Mm-hmm.
son and the first grandson.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then how did you become interested in your profession?
Well, actually, in terms of profession as a petroleum
Mm-hmm.
geoscientist, I really didn't get into this profession with a pre-developed interest.
Okay.
Instead, I kind of developed the interest on the fly when I was working for the oil and gas industry.
Okay.
But when I look back overall, the 30 years is really a very fun experience. The job actually, or the industry actually treat me very well.
Okay. So then what did you study at university?
I was in the geology department
Mm-hmm.
at National Taiwan University. And so I started with geology, and then later on uh, come to United States, start studying geophysics.
Okay. So then how and when did you come to the US?
I came to U.S. After graduate from National Taiwan University, and then I served in the military for 2 years. It is a compulsory
Mm-hmm.
mission for each man to serve the country. And so after graduate in 1979, after 2 years of compulsory military service, I came to United States in 1981.
Okay. And what made you decide to come to the US? Was it just to study, or was there any other reason?
Mainly is really to study. I after I graduated from the college and during the 2 years of military service, and I was thinking about what should I do next. So I started applying for a graduate school in the U.S. And I was actually lucky to get a few acceptance from the schools. And for that, actually Princeton University, the Department of Geological and Geophysical departments, they were able to offer me with a full scholarship.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the scholarship actually, on the surface, it appears to be a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Each year is about 18,000 or 19,000. But you take this full scholarship, you pay for tuition. The only thing remaining is about like $500 to $600 per month as a kind of the graduate student stipend.
Mm-hmm.
Nevertheless, it was really a good help.
Mm-hmm.
Help financially, because at that time, nobody is really well off to pay for that kind of money.
Yeah. So when you first came to the United States, was there kind of a culture shock, or what were the main challenges of immigrating to come over to study?
Yeah, I think culture shock is probably a little bit too strong
Okay.
because, but I did observe a few differences. Because as a foreign student and prepared to come to U.S. for graduate school, I have largely anticipated the situations in the U.S. So talking about cultural shock, I would not probably describe it as a cultural shock, but I did observe a few differences. The first interesting difference is that the professor or your student advisor tend to treat you as an equal instead of treat you as some with some hierarchical situation of between teacher and students, very typical traditional Oriental society. Right over here, the professors and the students are more like friends. And they, my advisor, Professor Robert A. Feeney, the first time we met, I addressed him as Professor Feeney. And he looked at me and said, Jeff, just call me Bob.
Okay.
So that was a very interesting observation to start with. And then the second interesting observation is that basically, I think it is interesting to see in the US, it is kind of allow each individual be a lot more self-centered in terms of pursuing personal happiness. And we grew up in the typical Oriental society. We've been educated that you need to set aside, for most of the time, you need to be selfless. You need to consider the bigger good. And therefore, your personal happiness not always be a very high priority. But I was kind of totally surprised to see that while you can be pursuing your self-happiness, you're allowed to be more self-centered to take care of yourself. So overall, really, it's a different value system. There is no good and bad. And later on, what I realized is that really, personally, you just have to achieve a kind of a balance between self-centered versus selfless and a bigger good. It's just a balance act, basically.
Yeah, that's very true. So were there any
but before you go, in terms of cultural shock, even though I did not experience any in the early days when I come to the United States, I did observe some cultural shock with the COVID-19 situation.
Really? Okay.
We can talk about that later.
Yeah, we can talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
So were there any major challenges when you first came to the US? I know you said you received a scholarship to Princeton, so financially you had some of it covered, but were there any other major challenges communicating socially or otherwise?
Well, really, I think the first challenge is always the language barrier. And regardless how good you are, because language itself is ultimately kind of part of the living culture. And like, for instance, the first time I went to a bank and trying to open up an account, the teller basically asked me that, okay, Mr. Pan, you want to open an account? Do you want to have a now account or you want to have a checking account? Checking account, I understand. Account is their internal terminology in terms of combination of checking and saving. Anytime when you're low in one account, they can just automatically transfer one to the other. How would I know what is now account? So the language is basically always the first barrier and first challenge. But I was kind of extremely lucky because we, as a graduate student, especially first year, very rarely we were lucky enough to have a single room to start with. So I was paired up with an Indian person. And that was the first year. And of course, I learned a lot with him. But unfortunately, Indian English is with very strong accent.
Yes.
And so I do learn a lot from him, but not really, really very much. The second year, I was extremely lucky to pair up with also a Chinese American. But he is actually a Chinese American with a lot of foreign background because he basically attended the US school in Brazil. He was immigrating very early on in his young age. And so we two pair up, and his English is much better than I did it at that time. So I tried to kind of learn with him, and he understands a lot of the U.S. culture as well. And he actually gave me a piece of very good advice. He's basically said, Jeff, in order to learn the language, the first is that you need to be able to comprehend it, able to understand the English first. And his advice was for me to basically, when I have time, just listen to the 3 major channels, the U.S. news broadcast. And in the very beginning, I have to listen very, very carefully. And also, I have to turn on the caption. Mm-hmm. There's caption. He said, by the time you can turn on the TV, listening to it, and go ahead and tend to your own work, and still understand what it is trying to tell you, then basically your comprehension capability is there. So I do that every day with 1.5 hours of major news. And about 6 months later, I was happy to find out that I really don't have to sit in front of TV. I could walk around the rooms and I could understand what the anchorman or the anchor woman is trying to tell.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so you studied geophysics at Princeton. What made you decide to stay at Princeton as a research associate?
Oh, that's a that's a very long story.
Okay.
But if you're interested, will tell you. By the time it was 1986, I was anticipating that I need to kind of finish my degree and graduate from the department. So I started attending the job affairs and start attending interviews, campus interviews. And at that time in the 1986, the oil price is very, very low. And most of the earth science related either university department, actually they heavily reduced the program or even just closed the program. So it is very difficult to find geoscience related job. However, only a few of the oil companies, they were still hiring. So I was able to sign up with the campus interview and a job fair with a few oil companies. So I was lucky that I did get a few offers from the oil companies. And of the few offers, the one that I particularly like is the offer from Texaco.
Okay.
I'm familiar with the oil company because Texaco is no longer existing. Mm-hmm. Basically, Texaco merged with Chevron later on. So it's become Chevron now. So of the few offers, this is the one that I particularly like. So I basically turned down the rest of the offers, trying to keep this offer. And in the offer letter, they said, I have 3 weeks to decide.
Okay.
At the job. And during the time, my advisor, Professor Feeney, he was on summer vacation in Canada. And I figure I have 3 weeks. And I'll wait for him to come back and I'll sit down and talk with him and get his blessing to accept the job. But never realized in the summer of 1986, the oil price all of a sudden dipped down to $12.
Wow.
And the company, Texaco, they had to call me. They have to call me and backtrack the offer.
Okay.
So I was really, really depressed. Mm-hmm. When the Professor Feeney came back, I told him about my experience. And being a real gentleman, he basically said, Jeff, don't feel bad and don't get frustrated. Don't worry about the situation. Let's write a proposal. We'll get a grant to support you as a postdoc.
Okay.
Yeah, just stay with the Princeton. Don't worry about the situation. So together we did write a few proposals, send it out to different foundations like NSF, and one particular one went to Office of Naval Research, and we got a 2 years grant from the Office of Naval Research, and so with that I stayed one additional year as a postdoc, and later on the oil industry kind of turned around, and I didn't really try to interview for a job, but one guy that is about 2 years senior to me from Princeton University was working for ARCO, and he came back to conduct a campus interview. But due to my previous experience with the oil company, I was not very enthusiastic in talking with any oil company. But I kind of bumped into him in the hallway, and he said, "Jeff, I'm interviewed for ARCO. Why didn't you come and interview with me, or at least talk to me, right?" I said, "Well, his name is Jay Nansen." I said, "Jay, at this point, I'm really not interested in finding a job with oil company. And besides, I really don't have my updated or brush up resume to come and talk to you." And Jay said, "Jeff, never mind. Don't worry about the resume. Just come and talk to me tomorrow, okay? Tomorrow." So I did go and talk to him, went and talked to him. I did go and talk to him the next day. And the interview was very smooth, and he said, basically say, "Jeff, we need people like you to work for ARCO. And why don't you come for a planned interview? I'll arrange that. If you really don't like the job, at least you can come to Dallas. The first day will be a job interview. The second day, we will show you around Dallas." And so I did that. I was more kind of interested in seeing Dallas than really to have a job. I never realized that the one thing leads to the other. And I did not see Dallas at all, because the first day I was interviewed with a group originally signed up that talked to me. And during my presentation, traditionally you go for a planned visit, and then you present your kind of thesis topics. And there were several group of people presented at my presentation. One of the gentlemen realized that I was interviewed with one specific group, and he insists I need to interview with his group as well. So I ended up using the second day interview.
Okay.
Group. Did not see Dallas at all. And really they were kind of internal competition. And the long story short is that I ended up working for the second group with a job offer that is kind of really nice at the time. But at the time, I really did not look for an oil industry job. Kind of stumbled into it.
Okay, that's really interesting. So you already mentioned that your first initial job was didn't succeed because of the fall of the oil markets. But after you enter the Atlantic Richfield Company, or ARCO, how was the experience? Was there any more fluctuation in the oil markets, and how did that affect your work?
Yes, speaking of oil industry, unfortunately, the oil and gas industry is kind of a cyclic commodity market, and it is completely determined by the price is completely determined by the supply and demand. So when you look back in terms of history, there are actually significant up and downs of the oil price. But whenever there is up or downs, it creates instability. When it is up too much, unfortunately, it kind of hinders the growth of the economy. But when it is down very much, then the oil companies start kind of have a reduction of this workforce. And a lot of times they call it layoff, or sometimes company prefer to call it company reorganization, but they all the reduction of the workforce anyway. So speaking of my working experience with ARCO, I ended up working for ARCO for 10 years. It was between 1988 and 1998. And during the 10 years of time, I actually experienced certain layoffs or certain reorganization. So the frequency is really a lot higher than once every year.
Oh, okay.
So it was the first few layoffs, it was pretty scary experience for me because you don't know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Traditionally, the company tells you that each one stay in the office. Then your manager will come by to your office to tell you, Jeff, you have a job with us. Or Jeff, we're sorry, unfortunately, we cannot keep you. And so the first few ones, it was really, really scary. But then by the time you get into the later ones, I pretty much realized that this layoff or reorganization, something is that it's out of your control.
Mm-hmm.
It's out of your control anyway. So I was able to kind of keep it out of my mind. I basically focus on things I can have control. So maybe because of that, I was able to kind of remain my focus and still have the kind of a high performance in my job. But to tell you the least is that 10 years with 13 reorganization, it was really a period of very, very volatile time.
Mm-hmm.
So I and my colleague, or I and my co-workers that we work for ARCO, after that period of time, when we look back now, we kind of tend to joking with each other. We said, hey, we survived the ARCO days. ARCO days. So either we are technically very, very strong, or we have very, very high EQ to survive the situation.
Mm-hmm.
The department that I worked for in ARCO days was called ERTS, ERTS, Exploration and Reservoir Technical Service Group. In 1988, when I joined ARCO, the department has more than 1,000 people.
Wow.
By the time it gets to 1998, and I leave ARCO because of another work opportunity of Oryx. So I left ARCO to join Oryx. By the time I left ARCO to join Oryx, the department has 94 people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was a period of very volatile time. But overall, what I learned is that really, whenever there is a layoff coming, there is a company reorganization coming, if it is out of your control, just shut it down. Don't think about it.
Don't worry. Mm-hmm.
Focus on things you have control.
Yes. So how would you describe the diversity in your kind of career or community at ARCO? In terms of like people of color or different genders, what was the like kind of diversity like?
Yeah, the majority of the makeup of the group is really white.
Mm-hmm.
and most of the managers and executives are white as well. And the percentage of non-white, the percentage of the color people is probably in total make up about 15% of the total workforce.
Wow. So did you experience any kind of discrimination or being looked over for promotion or anything during your time in the field?
Yeah, specifically at ARCO and later on with the oil industry. I worked for oil industry for almost like 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the answer is yes.
Okay.
And the answer is yes, but to me, I think it's probably more of a human nature than a deliberate, malicious kind of discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I say that is because, as the old saying, the birds of the same feather
Mm-hmm.
together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for people like you and me, we tend to promote people like us, or we tend to hang around
Mm-hmm.
like us. We feel more comfortable of hanging around people similar to us.
Yes.
So in a way, the oil and gas industry, most of the managers and executives are non-colored people. So it is inevitable they tend to promote people like that.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, yeah, during the 30 years of time, I do have a few occasions being looked over.
Okay. So how do you like maintain your positivity or maintain your work ethic knowing that some people or you're being looked over by your manager or executives?
Well, I think the way that I keep my motivation is like the way I just tell you.
Mm-hmm.
To understand the situation, and the look over is probably not trying to, or it's a deliberate act,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
just intention to let it happen. So in a way, I just keep telling myself that, well, work hard, focus on things you have control, and
Mm-hmm.
good things will follow. And it did.
Nice.
In
Okay.
certain sense. In certain sense, yeah.
Yeah.
It is not as smooth or I wish I could be a rising star, right?
Mm-hmm.
To everybody, like I have my tenure for 2 or 3 years in each department, and there will be promotion year after year. But most of the things don't work that way.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is, I guess.
Yes. So what do you think the impact of a petroleum geoscientist is on the community and the world, or the impact of the oil industry on the world in general?
Yeah, speaking of that, contrary to the general belief,
Mm-hmm.
the oil and gas is going to run out like the peak oil, peak gas theory. The remaining oil and gas reserve is really quite large. So it is in quantity so abundant that it's gonna be here for a long, long time with the current world consumption rate. So in terms of that, I think the petroleum scientists' responsibility is to locate the resources, and then try to extract them with the most efficient and most environmental friendly way to provide the world with the affordable energy. In a way, I think as long as the world is needing energy to keep the civilization going,
Mm-hmm.
to maintain a reasonable living standard, we need to have some sort of or some form of energy. And at this point, I just really don't see any replacement energy that in scale is large enough to replace oil and gas.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and just really quickly related to COVID-19, how do you think the pandemic will affect the future of oil and gas?
Well, in the near term, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Long term, no.
Okay.
The reason why I say that is, as I just mentioned, that as long as the world is needing energy to keep the civilization going or to maintain a reasonable living standard, in the foreseeable future, the world still needs a healthy oil and gas industry to provide the affordable energy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you worked at ARCO for 10 years and then you transferred to a better opportunity. When did you start working for Anadarko in China?
Okay, that's another long story.
Okay.
That is another long story. I mentioned I worked for ARCO
Mm-hmm.
10 years. And then an opportunity presented itself. So I left ARCO, joined this company called Oryx. And at that time, it seems to be a very good idea because both ARCO and Oryx, and they both in Dallas. And the opportunity in Oryx was able to presented me with a very significant enhancement of the benefit package.
Mm-hmm.
And so with a much higher pay and kids staying in the same school, family living in the same house, it's an offer
Mm-hmm.
cannot refuse. So I joined Oryx. I left ARCO and joined Oryx. But what I did not realize is 6 months later, Oryx merged with this company called Kerr McGee.
Okay.
And Kerr McGee is a company in Houston.
Oh, okay.
So they want to have all the critical members all in Houston. So I have to move from Dallas to Houston, mainly for a reasonable job, for a job reason.
Mm-hmm.
And Kerr McGee actually merged with Anadarko
Okay.
in 2006. So I ended up working for Anadarko. And after the merger, they needed to have somebody to go to Beijing office to take care of the subsurface and operation.
Mm-hmm.
So I was chosen to be the one that's taking care of the subsurface and operation. So I left Houston for Beijing April 2007.
Okay.
So that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question.
No, that's really interesting that there were so many mergings going on while you
Right.
when you wanted to stay in Dallas but ended up going to Beijing.
Right. That for me, actually, personally, I only changed my job once.
Mm-hmm.
That was from ARCO to Oryx. And then later on, the job changes all with company mergers.
Mm-hmm. So as executive expatriate for Anadarko in China for a long time, how big of a change in China's energy industry did you witness?
It was quite large.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much do you familiar with the oil and gas industry, especially the offshore oil and gas industry. The offshore, basically, we call it offshore is non-land, is
Mm-hmm.
marine oil and gas industry. The offshore oil and gas industry actually is kind of categorized by water depths.
Mm-hmm.
Shallow water, oil and gas, and deep water oil and gas. And the definition of deep water was a bit of evolving definition. It used to be like anything that's deeper than 200 feet is called deep water. But later on, it evolves into anything that's deeper than 1,000 feet.
Oh, wow.
330 meters depth is called deep water. So overall, the offshore oil and gas industry for China kind of started late,
Mm-hmm.
the offshore oil and gas business. So in the early days, in order to catch up, they have to basically conduct like a joint venture or
Mm-hmm.
development with foreign countries, and particularly with Western countries, to learn the technology and learn the technical know-how of how to operate. So by the time in 2007, when I was in Beijing, the China offshore oil and gas business is pretty much learn how to explore and develop and produce in the shallow water. The only thing that they have slightly deficient is in the front of integration.
Mm-hmm.
But that they actually quickly learn how to do that as well. And what is interesting development is that by the time it is like 2012, China come up with its first ultra deep water drilling rig. It's called Haiyang Shiyou
Okay.
Yuan. And so China actually got into deep water during the time I was in Beijing. And so it was a huge progress, because from shallow water to deep water is a huge progress and huge leap. So it's a very significant progress.
Wow.
At the time, by the time I left Beijing, it was 2014. I think the only thing that, in terms of offshore exploration, development, the only thing that China has yet to prove or learn is the deep water development and production. So
Okay.
it's a fairly significant progress, and huge progress too for the Chinese oil and gas industry.
Okay. So what do you think contributed to their rapid growth?
I think many two things. I think the first thing is a very highly educated geoscience related people that is coming out from the typical university or the petroleum universities
Mm-hmm.
in China. And they basically generate very highly educated and efficient workforce to work in the oil and gas industry. That's first thing. The second thing is the policy, the government policy.
Mm-hmm.
Government policy is in such a way that it encourage or it also provide enough incentive for the foreign or Western countries to come and conduct a joint venture to provide the capital
Mm-hmm.
or investment.
Okay. So since you worked in Dallas and in America for a long time with the oil industry, how did you have to adapt, or did you have to adapt to working with your Chinese and Beijing counterparts while you were there?
Yes, quite a few things. I quickly learned when I talk with my direct reports.
Mm-hmm.
Even I talk with my counterparts that in CNOOC. CNOOC stands for Chinese National Offshore Oil Company.
Okay.
Yeah. So in China, basically, all the foreign companies cannot conduct development or production alone.
Mm-hmm.
It should be joint venture with a Chinese company. And for the offshore businesses, the counterpart, of course, is CNOOC.
Mm-hmm.
So I had my counterpart working in CNOOC. I come to a very quick realization is that a lot of times they would say yes, or they will appears to be agreeable.
Mm-hmm.
But the yes turned out to be not a true yes.
Okay.
And the agreeable can be actually no. And they've been so polite. They will not say certain things to negate you or to disagree with you in the open meetings. And you almost always have to find each individual's true intention with one-on-one meeting.
Okay.
And it actually takes me a few lessons to learn that.
Mm-hmm.
And so you kind of have to kind of sit down with each individual to find out the true answer. That's kind of the first thing. The second thing is that despite that, each individual is very, very strong technically in their own, in his own or her own field. The teamwork is just not guaranteed.
Okay.
Yeah. Each individual is very strong in their personal area, but they tend to keep what they know very close to their chest. It's not an automatic sharing. So it takes a long time for me to let the people in my department understand that there is really no individual success
Mm-hmm.
unless there's a team success. So if the team cannot achieve its goal or objective, it reflects failure to each individual. So it takes that kind of concept and keep telling them about teamwork to truly foster the teamwork spirit.
Okay. So, how did your family adjust to life in China?
Well, actually, you're talking about three of us.
Okay.
I have my wife and my son. When we were transferred to Beijing, my son was ready to attend his last year, senior year of high school. So there was debate,
Mm-hmm.
actually debate of leaving him behind
Mm-hmm.
in the United States to attend the last year of high school, and then he will go to college or university, and without kind of take him to Beijing.
Mm-hmm.
But then I and my wife we decide
Mm-hmm.
that it's probably going to be a kind of a life enhanced experience for him. So we took him to Beijing.
Okay.
The night before he left the United States, 6 of his classmates come to see him off.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 3 boys and 3 girls. Talking with Jason, and then bid him farewell
Mm-hmm.
to Beijing. And after Jason's classmate left. Jason went into his room, closed the door. And he started crying.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I look at each other. We thought, oh, what have we done? But things pretty much already decided.
Mm-hmm.
We won, 3 of us all together anyway. So the long story short is that Jason attended school in Beijing called WEB. It's a called Western Academy of Beijing. Western Academy of Beijing.
Mm-hmm.
The school specially prepared for foreign students. And the long story short, Jason applied for U.S. University, got accepted, and the day before he was ready to leave Beijing
Mm-hmm.
for U.S., he came to us, come to me and my wife, and he said, "Dad, Mom, I just wanted you to know, to me, the Beijing experience was pure fun." And it was such a big relief for us.
Mm-hmm.
I and my wife, we thought, oh, thank God we did the right thing
Mm-hmm.
to kind of insist that he came with us. And for me and my wife, of course, it's a much easier adjustment.
Yeah.
My wife, she's also Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
We learn the language. We know the language. We know the culture well enough to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly if you want to talk about adjustments, they were all really, really very minor adjustments. It's basically the adjustments of that. You have a little bit smaller personal space because of
Mm-hmm.
and the secretaries or the drivers tends to be more involved in terms of your daily life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like in the U.S. you go to work, and then when you come home, it's only your family.
Yeah.
You have the secretaries, you have the REs,
Mm-hmm.
the drivers. They tend to be kind of part of your daily life, and that's different. And for the Americans, they tend to be very, very emphasized on their privacy.
Yeah.
In terms of personal life. Over there, that you kind of have to open up a little bit
Mm-hmm.
to have a few more people in your daily life, and that's kind of an adjustment. And other than that, some minor adjustment would be with the traffic congestion
Mm-hmm.
in Beijing, and some of the kind of the air quality issues.
Yeah.
And those are really, really minor adjustments. And for me, I and my wife, and even including Jason, we actually enjoy our experience in Beijing very, very much in a very, very positive way. And I and my wife actually come across this list of about 500 sites or places in Beijing or near Beijing, must go list.
Mm-hmm.
So we, of course, after the first year, Jason left for university, and living in Beijing is only the family is only I and my wife.
Mm-hmm.
So we made an effort to kind of visit, going down the list, visiting this different sites, kind of historical sites or scenic area, and we really have a blast of staying in Beijing.
That's nice.
Very, very positive experience.
So did your son come to visit you every summer after school was let out, or did he stay in the US for university over the summers?
He stayed in the university and for most of the time during. But the arrangement from the company is that they provide travel fundings for children or for kids in university to come and visit parents twice every year.
Wow, that's nice.
Yeah, so once in the summertime, in the winter time. Only for the first winter that Jason decided to spend his winter vacation and Thanksgiving with his friends. In the rest of time, he actually came and visited us.
Okay.
The remaining 7 times.
That's nice. So what do you think are the best parts of a Chinese workplace? You already mentioned some of the disadvantages or some of the things that you needed to work on, like teamwork. But what are some of the pros?
The pros is like what I mentioned early on, is that the Beijing workforce or the Beijing local workforce is a group of very, very highly educated people. And they are very highly educated and they are very, very devoted. They are willing to put in long hours to get the work done. So, and these are kind of the very positive aspect of the local workforce. They are intelligent, they are smart, very well educated, very dedicated, and once we let them understand that the spirit of teamwork is very important, and the U.S. working culture is that you need to be upfront and communicate early on, and it is okay to take risks. It's okay to have a failure case, and failure case is part of the learning process. And they work beautifully. They are very, very productive.
Okay. So what are your major takeaways from your time in China? It can be anything, doesn't have to be work related.
Yeah. I think the major takeaway of my experience in China is that China is a very rapid progress. Well, first of all, the most impressive part is the rapid progress of China. And China is a very vibrant country with very highly educated and devoted workforce. So I think China will be one of the top countries very soon.
Okay. And so you mentioned a lot of the younger generation or the people who graduated from petroleum universities or the big universities in China, they're very highly educated and they're very productive and very effective. They're willing to put in a lot of work hours. How does that differ from the younger generation in the US?
Well, I think in general, the difference is between, I think, first of all, I mentioned early on about this self-centered. Self-centered and kind of a pursuit of the personal happiness. In general, I think the younger generation between China and US is that in China, the younger generation, I could say, they have more sense of the selfless and more sense of the bigger good.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of motivation, these are group of people in China. They are very, very motivated in terms of pursuing higher education
Mm-hmm.
or going after certain success.
Mm-hmm.
The motivation is definitely there. And in terms of motivation, the younger people, the youth in US is more like pursuing their personal happiness. And it is a lot like if you're not happy now, do something for a change type of situation. So
Mm-hmm.
in terms of comparison, I think the Chinese are more endurance. They are more
Mm-hmm.
endurance to pressure, and I think this may be, even though I don't like entrance examination
Mm-hmm.
determine what university you attend or what high school you attend, but because of this entrance examination, I think most of the Chinese young people, they are no doubt a lot more endurance to pressure.
Mm-hmm. More competitive or
More competitive and more kind of endurance and can perform under pressure because ultimately exam itself is a pressure.
yeah, it's very true. So when you went to China, your son was already in his senior year of high school, but does your experience in China change any of the expectations you have for him?
Not really, because
Mm-hmm.
from the very beginning, I and my wife, we kind of fairly consistently trying to educate my children to be a responsible world citizen. And from the very beginning, we keep both of my kids bilingual.
Mm-hmm.
It's Chinese and English at the same time. So when they grow up, both of them could speak fluent Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
Reading is a very tough part. Reading is a little bit different. But my daughter, she was able to kind of, for most of the time, was able to read most of the simple articles, and she was able to at least watch Chinese soap opera to enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And Jason, of course, he also speaks fluent Chinese, but his reading and comprehension capability is a little bit less than his sister.
Okay.
So overall, I think our China experience actually either confirm or enhance their experience because they realize that extra language or additional language is beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to go around the city without we being accompanying them. They could learn Chinese and they could get on public transportation and talk to people in the street and trying to go places they want, visit the things they want, doing the things they want. And also we teach them early on to be kind of open-minded towards different races.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to be in China to kind of witness that a different exposed culture actually enrich their life. And so it's pretty consistent with the way that we try to educate them from the very beginning.
That's good. So now moving on to your kind of your experiences in Houston. You came to Houston after um, the companies merged with Anadarko or with
Kerr McGee.
with Kerr McGee, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very complicated.
Yeah. So could you kind of describe your involvement with the community nowadays?
With the community nowadays is that really I and my wife, we kind of split up our community responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
I was more involved, I am more involved with the kind of community, but also related to my profession.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife, she is taking off kind of a general community-facing type of community involvement. So
Mm-hmm.
we split up, and that's part of the reason why my involvement is kind of always with this Chinese American Petroleum Association, CAPA, or North America North America Chinese Earth Scientists Association. It's kind of more profession related.
Okay. So how did you become involved with the Chinese American Petroleum Association, or CAPA?
Yeah, I think that's another long story.
I'm sorry. Okay.
When the company moved us down to Houston,
Mm-hmm.
late 1999, and so by the time in year 2000, we find our house and move the family, and kind of trying to reestablish, trying to reach out, trying to remake our connections.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my coworkers introduced me to this CAPA organization, and we started to attend CAPA activities. And CAPA, being a professional association, it really not only organizes professional related activities, it also organizes member activities that are suitable for family to attend.
Okay.
And like for every year, they have a spring picnic, and they have several luncheon type of meetings, and they invite people not necessarily from petroleum industry. A lot of times they invite people for topics is how to manage your wealth, how to invest,
Mm-hmm.
how to kind of enrich your life with paintings or calligraphy. So not only professional activities, there is also family-oriented activities. So it is very easy for us to join them and start attending the activity, because we just moved on to Houston, and we try to make our new friends and try to reach out to different places,
Mm-hmm.
attending their activities. And we like the way this association operates. So we started to join as a member. And by the time it gets to 2001, they said, Jeff, we welcome you to join us as a member, but we want you to contribute more. We want you to be the officer,
Mm-hmm.
to be part of this subcommittees that organize events and service the members. At that time, I was thinking, man, I got a real-time, full-time job, and no doubt this services will provide additional hours that I have to put in for volunteer society. But when I look at it, most of the people, they all have their daytime job, and it's a group of really selfless people. And during the 2 years of time that between 1991, year 2000 and 2001, I really made a few really, really good friends within the association. And these are friends I still keep contact with. So they wanted me to step up, provide my time and service. So I said, okay, I could provide my time and service, but I don't want any title.
Okay.
Any titles with the association. So I start providing my time and service with the organization. By the time it gets to 2003, the president approached me and said, Jeff, just contribute your time is not good enough. We want you to be part of us. We want you to be the officers. And it was a very big struggle because I realized that when you get into the officers, then the only way is up. You cannot kind of gradually reduce your responsibility. This organization has a very good setup. Is that they have a core team. They call it leadership team.
Mm-hmm.
The leadership team is that the first step is you become a treasurer of this organization. And then by the time you fulfill your responsibility, the next year you've been promoted to vice president. And after you serve as a vice president, you're promoted to president.
Okay.
So it's a kind of commitment of a 3 years term that once you get into the leadership team. And I need to kind of clarify why is this such a time-consuming job is because at that time when I joined the group, we have members of about 1,400 people.
Oh wow, that's a lot.
It's a huge association.
Mm-hmm.
You could imagine whenever you organize activity, it's almost like a full-time job.
Yeah.
Imagine you organize activity with such a big population attendant, and the association actually evolved very quickly. By the time, speaking of now, we almost have 1,800 members.
Wow.
So it's a huge organization. It's also a very successful organization. So speaking of that, they convinced me to be the treasurer. Mm-hmm. So by the time it gets to year 2005, I become the president. And so it's a long answer.
Mm-hmm.
And after the presidentship, they asked the past president to step in to the board of directors.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another topic.
Okay. So you made the journey of a treasurer to vice president to president, and then you stepped into the board of directors. What did you do as, I mean, obviously as a treasurer, you just manage finances, but what did you do as a vice president or president or as a member of the board of directors?
Yeah, the vice president is, of course, is help the president
mm-hmm.
things organized and get things executed.
Mm-hmm.
And particular responsibility for the vice president is that the association has an annual meeting. The annual meeting is for technical meeting. So this annual meeting is almost like a professional meeting where you sending the meeting notice early on and ask for people to submit abstract for their presentation, and then you organize the technical program.
Okay.
The technical program usually have attendance of 200 to 300 members.
Wow.
For a technical meeting. And the technical meeting usually is a one-day meeting with the keynote speeches in the morning,
mm-hmm.
and current technical sessions of 5 to 6 in the afternoon. So you could imagine it's almost like a presentation about close to 100 technical presentations. Come up with a program and get the brochure ready, get the technical program ready, arrange a meeting place, and
all sorts of things.
All sorts of things. Find the meeting venue, and then and the meeting itself provides coffee and tea and lunch and stuff like that, and then reception. Basically, so the vice president's responsibility is that it organized the for that specific year the technical symposium, which I mentioned, and then the annual meeting. The annual meeting is where you pass on the torch. It's a transition. It's a transition. Usually, it's a dinner, very close to the Chinese New Year time. So you invite all the membership to a dinner, and then the executive committee presented what has been done for this year with the association, and then during the dinner you elect president of next year, vice president next year, treasurer of next year, and of course, in tradition is that if you have done a good job as a treasurer, then they elect you into vice president. If you've done a good job, then they on the vice presidency, they elect you to be a president. And so it usually, again, is a dinner banquet or get together of about around 200 and 250. So it's a huge event. And then the rest, you have some subcommittees to help you. So vice president is mainly helping the president. And then once you become a president, then you are no doubt the figurehead of the association. You report association to all the outside entities, and you also be the person kind of responsible for the success and failure of the organization for that specific year.
Okay. Then you said you were also a part of the North American Chinese Geoscientists Association.
Right.
What do you do with that association?
This association is really most of the members are in the academia. This is a group of geoscientists, Chinese American geoscientists that is work in the kind of like U.S. or Canadian Geological Survey, or American universities or Canadian universities. So a lot of them are researchers, a lot of them are professors.
Okay.
And so they are a lot more academic. The CAPA Association is more kind of industrial oriented, getting to the area of oil and gas business or energy business. It's North America Chinese Scientists Association is more like professors, researchers working in the public services agency. So they are different.
Okay. All right. So now we're going to move into the COVID-19 coronavirus interview section. It's kind of a special section because the times are pretty special and pretty significant. So how has the pandemic affected your daily life?
Oh, it's very much.
Yeah.
It's almost like my daily life is totally upside down. We really go out now unless it's absolutely necessary, like for grocery shopping. You have no choice but going out. I know there are kind of online service like Instagram, Instacart, or or delivery to door type of service. But it's just different because when you need a pack of meat, or when you need to have some apples, or you need to have some,
Mm-hmm.
you just have to see them.
Yes, feel them.
Yeah, and then feel them and buy them. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So unless it's necessary, we don't go out other than grocery shopping, doctor's visit.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really go out much anymore.
Okay. How has the pandemic changed your perspective about the future? How society will change?
Well, actually, to me, I think not much in terms of long term.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you look back in history, we have been through Spanish flu,
Mm-hmm.
SARS, Ebola,
Mm-hmm.
N1H1, and we always overcome.
Mm-hmm.
I think the situation will get back to its normalcy once the vaccine arrives.
Yes.
Don't know when, but eventually it will. So I think we will eventually overcome and prevail.
It's very positive thinking. Have you engaged any?
Don't you agree?
Yes, I definitely do think so, that like the entire situation will be better, but just kind of some people just don't think that even with a vaccine, many people I think that we still might need to maintain social distancing, or more people would be more inclined to wear masks or stay at home from work if they're more sick than usual, just because of this entire situation that has affected everybody in the country.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of that, I agree with you that certain things probably forever changed. But hopefully these are probably minor things. Like, for instance, people will probably change habits of handshaking. But coming from the Oriental society, we tend to bow as well.
Yes.
So there are different ways of saying hi, or there are different ways of showing your friendliness. So yeah, certain things will change forever, but they don't bother me that much.
Yes. So have you engaged in any active response activities regarding the outbreak, such as any like volunteering or fundraising?
Volunteering is a lot more difficult now because
Staying at home.
You don't go out, you stay at home. But we did participate early on with the fundraisings or donating money or mask to Wuhan. But now it's very little involvement. It's all in the early days.
Yes.
Early days in February and March.
So how much of your daily life is conducted through digital communication tools, and how do you think it's different from personal, in-person communicational experiences?
Well, now almost everything. Everything in my daily life is they are committed. They are conducted with the digital electronic device now. And in terms of difference, I think for the person that you are communicating with, if you have at least met them once before, it really doesn't make much difference. For the person that you have never met, and then you have to conduct communication or business through phone or video conference, it kind of it's kind of challenging.
Mm-hmm.
need to understand this person first, and you can communicate with them digitally.
Mm-hmm. So what do you miss most about the life before the pandemic?
Well, of course, you know, I'm a very outdoor type of person.
Mm-hmm.
I like sports, I like outdoor activities. So,
Mm-hmm.
of course, I miss all the outdoor activities.
Yes.
I miss very much of that. And in terms of people to people interaction, I miss the eye contact.
Yes.
I miss the handshake,
Mm-hmm.
hugs.
So, yeah. And then now relating to as an Asian American or as an Asian, how do you think the pandemic has impacted other people's views of Asians and Asian Americans?
Unfortunately, I think that there's some impact
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the view on Asians or Asian Americans or Asian American Chinese. But hopefully, this is only to a very small group of people, and due largely to the influence of politicians'
Mm-hmm.
irresponsible comments.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that this type of negativities or negative views will go away as COVID-19 is behind us.
Mm-hmm.
Time, it will gradually restore the right image of the Asians or Asian American.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned very early on in this interview that you think there's a major culture shock now because of the pandemic. Could you kind of expand on what you meant by that?
Yes, the culture shock to me of this one is it comes in several different fronts.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is that the economy of U.S. I did not realize the economy of U.S. is, especially its makeup workforce, is so shallow.
Mm-hmm.
Like only with a few weeks of not going out to work, that a lot of families, millions of families,
Mm-hmm.
have run out of their savings
Yeah.
and even have trouble of providing food on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a completely cultural shock. This is almost like to me, this only happens in a third world country. And we're talking about America. It's deemed as the number one nation
Mm-hmm.
of the world. So that's the first culture shock, the first one. The second one that I mentioned is that I realized that Americans, they tend to allow each individuals to pursue, to be self-centered, to pursue self-happiness.
Mm-hmm.
But I was thinking of the quality, the general quality and the education of the Americans is setting a bar that is never too low in such a way that even though they pursue self happiness, they will not disregard
Mm-hmm.
others' safety or other people's rights or privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And during this COVID-19 pandemic, I was really, really surprised to see people come out and protest of this stay-home policy with slogans says that I need a haircut.
Yeah.
And with slogan says that open up and let the weak die. And this is totally a culture shock to me. I was thinking in general, the bar of the quality of Americans is set pretty high. These are people is generally courteous and polite and wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
But that image or that protest totally changed my view. And I could imagine people go out and protest, say, open up, I need to work. I need to feed the family.
Mm-hmm.
Never realize people go out and say, open up, I need a haircut. Open up, let the weak die. So it just totally blow my mind.
Mm-hmm. All right. So just kind of wrapping up the rest of this interview, how would you identify yourself? Asian American, Asian, Chinese American, Taiwanese American?
I will identify myself as Chinese American.
Mm-hmm.
As Chinese American with deep roots in Chinese culture.
Mm-hmm. And what are your hopes for the Asian American community or Chinese American community in the U.S.?
My hope for the Asian American or Chinese American is that you need to work hard. You need to work hard and be success. But I also think that for most of the younger generation, they need to be prepared. They need to be prepared to develop the capability so that they could step up to the leadership type of position or step up to lead the initiatives. In general, there's a typical image of the Asian American or Chinese Americans being a group of people that are very good in technical work,
Mm-hmm.
technology. But this is a group of people that only can be a supporting staff or follower, but not leaders.
Mm-hmm.
I think the younger generation definitely need to shake off that image and seize every opportunity to step up, become a leader, or take the leadership to start any initiatives and get involved with the U.S. Political system and trying to join the mainstream, become mainstream of the political power or force. Don't be a group of voiceless people.
Definitely.
Anymore.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So do you have any advice for future generations or anything you would tell your great-great-grandchildren if they were to find this archive?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I think, again, I would advise the younger generation to work hard and leave nothing on the table. Never give up, never concede. If you have to fail, as I said early on, let your competitor beat you. If you
Mm-hmm.
fail, let the competitor beat you. Don't just throw in the towel yourself and never concede. And in terms of, if I have to tell my great children, great grandchildren, that I will tell them, hello, I'm your great grandfather. I'm speaking from the time of 21st century. And personally, I strongly believe there is a responsibility, or there is a mission in terms of passing down, in terms of heritage. I think the mission of each generation is that you need to work hard and provide an improve or better environment for the next generation. And for me, I think I work hard and pretty much fulfill my mission. Now, it's your turn to do the same. And I think you can do better than I do. So work hard and never give up.
Very nice. Is there anything else you would like to add that we haven't already mentioned?
I think really appreciate that Rice University is providing this opportunity. And I particularly appreciate that Rice University and then the students or interns are devoting their time and efforts to do this Asian American archive. And I think this is a very, very valuable thing. And I wish you and the organization every success. And keep doing the work, keep up the good job.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving us your time and answering all the questions for the archive. In that case, thank you for your time, and then we'll just conclude the interview here.
Okay. When you turn off the recording, I do have a question to ask you.
Sure.